Even with the release of UEFN, Fortnite creators used to spending hours MacGyvering together even the simplest of ideas in creative mode, but they shouldn't have to. So today we're talking about 10 past and present Fortnite mechanics we need in creative mode. Augments originally came to Fortnite at the beginning of Chapter 4, and players were pretty excited about them. They offered a new reward for surviving into the late game, and augments like Aerialist and First Assault became instant favorites. As Chapter 4 went on though, augments became more balanced and to some extent felt a bit watered down. Augments like Sprint Lines and Fast Fisher were added that just felt like filler, and most players ended up spending all their gold re-rolling augments until they got one of the few that were actually decent. In a competitive BR environment, you're limited in what players will actually consider a useful ability, but in a creative map, you can make augments an actual key feature of the gameplay. Imagine being able to assign augments to class selection devices, making classes feel more unique than just what gear you give them. Maybe we could connect them to item pickups to create all new types of power-ups for your players to collect. Or maybe you already have a fairly built-out map and those other ideas wouldn't work. Instead, you could add them onto your existing reward pool for completing certain quests, eliminating enemies, or even as an option on a prize wheel. But maybe we don't need to bring back Riftjector Seat. I think that one is better off left in the vault. Teased through a series of very strange IRL commercials before its release, Chrome made its debut in Chapter 3 Season 4 to mixed reviews from players. Some found it to be a fun and unique movement mechanic that added an additional layer of defense, while others simply saw it as another cheap way for players to escape fights they probably should have lost. But that seems to be a common complaint every time a new movement item is added, so what else is new? But aside from that, the new Chrome splashes gave us a different ability we've never had before, the ability to phase through walls. Carrying a couple of these around meant you could make your own door in just about any structure without destroying anything. Now imagine that mechanic being brought into a creative puzzle map where a strategic use of Chrome is required to get through certain walls or access hidden areas. It could also be used as a sort of portal system in a close quarters TDM map, making players cautious of turning their back on any wall in fear of someone phasing through it when they're not looking. Or better yet, someone could use it to create a more exciting live event than what was actually given to us at the end of Chapter 3. Yeah. Just such a waste. But we're not quite done discussing wasted story mechanics from Chapter 3, because next up, we're talking about reality saplings. Introduced in Chapter 3, Season 3, reality saplings gave players a chance to put their gardening skills to work and grow their very own legendary loot. After collecting a seed, players could deposit these seeds just about anywhere on the map, and as long as you were diligent in plucking the weeds around it, after a few games you'd have yourself some delicious new gear to land on straight from the bus. Eventually, players also found out that splashing the new saplings would help speed up their growth. If we got our hands on these little guys in creative mode, we'd of course need to have full control over how long it would take to grow each rarity of fruit. It would also be important to have control over what loot they dropped and whether or not splashes had an effect on them. But with those adjustable parameters in place, the reality saplings would make for an obvious addition to a farming focus map, where their growth progress could be saved and having to tend to weeds popping up would be an important task to manage as you develop your farm. You could even make the saplings the focus of your map and create something similar to Bed Wars, where you need to protect and tend to your tree while trying to collect other seeds to grow even more. Or you could go the simple route and have these trees already placed around the map as loot sources instead of the usual chests. But whatever you decide to create with them, I'm sure it'll be better than the disaster that was the final live event of Chapter 3. I'm still so sad about that. But there's no time for mourning because we're moving on to talking about combat caches. These little loot vaults hit the BR Island back in Chapter 4 and originally came with a rarity timer, which would start the loot at legendary rarity but would slowly drop down to rare if no one opened it in time. These caches couldn't be opened immediately though, as you first had to activate them, broadcasting its position to everyone for 50 seconds before it would finally open. Eventually this timer would be removed though and all loot would be stuck at rare. If we were to get this item in creative, we would definitely need the option to turn time cache tiers on or off, as well as adjusting the times for each. But with that in mind, I could see this item working great in a large combat map where loot is limited, which would give players a fun but difficult choice between rushing to the cache while it's still offering legendary loot or taking the safe play and doing what they can with the loot they have. You could even make an evac map where caches store loot in addition to special items that players have to collect and deposit at drop zones for points. But of course everyone would be able to see when a cache is being opened, making you a prime target to nearby teams. But if you're really looking to broadcast your position on the map, no other item does that better than the medallions. Introduced in Chapter 5, medallions made going after different bosses actually worth the hassle. Originally, these medallions only regenerated your shield, but multiple medallions could stack, allowing you to quickly recharge your shield in a fight and freeing a weapon slot as you no longer needed to carry shields. It didn't take long for players to figure out that these were pretty broken if you were able to get even 2, so they finally got a nerf later in the season and eventually got a whole new rework in Chapter 5 Season 2 and again in Season 3. Now medallions feel more customized to the actual bosses you get them from, giving you unique abilities for each one you collect. If we were to get these in creative mode, the simplest thing to do would be just give us a generic medallion item that can be customized with any of the past abilities. In addition, adding in some basic cosmetic settings to change things like glow color would allow you to easily differentiate between different medallions on your map. Having the ability to add these medallions to legendary chests or even set them as a low percentage drop chance from certain enemies would mean players have something seriously strong to grind for. Or maybe you could just give a single medallion all the abilities and use it as the ball in a crazy oddball map. And as someone who grew up on Halo, I can confidently say oddball is an underrated game mode that we should definitely bring back. If you've ever ventured outside the usual combat-focused creative maps, you've probably come across a map that's implemented some sort of quest system, which means you've probably seen how janky these systems can be when creators have to design them from scratch. So why not give us access to the quest system that Fortnite BR already has? Introduced all the way back in Chapter 2 Season 5, job boards were originally just bounty boards, giving you the quest to eliminate a specific marked player on the map in exchange for gold. But over time, they evolved to offer even more quests, such as racing to specific locations, digging up buried treasure, and a few others. As of Chapter 5, they've taken on a more espionage-focused theme, being reskinned into a more digital setup called Shadow Briefings, but they're essentially the same thing. Both versions, though, would make a perfect addition for Fortnite Creative, giving creators an easy way to add simple quests to their map. The system for this would be rather straightforward, simply requiring different quest markers for the creator to place down based on which quests they have available on their map. Want to have multiple treasure hunt quests? Allow creators to place multiple buried chests and let us set it to either randomly pick from those when a player chooses that quest or go in sequential order. And this logic could be applied to most of the other quest options as well. On top of that, being able to customize the loot or gold reward for each quest would allow you to build a more immersive economy system for your map. Few things about a battle royale game are more iconic than its storm. Whether it's growing fire, giant walls of moving stone, or a literal storm in the case of Fortnite, every BR has something that forces players together as the game draws to a close. This is a necessary mechanic in a BR mode unless you want every match to feel like the world's longest game of hide and seek. But why should we have to stick with the same boring storm mechanic for our creative maps? In Chapter 2 Season 2, we had a wall of water in place of our usual storm. This allowed players to swim in the storm and even gain height in the storm before diving back in, usually to their death. This was the only time we ever got to experience a truly unique storm in Fortnite, and it would be a shame not to explore it more. Adding in the ability to customize not only the visuals of the storm, but also how it affects players that are in it could make the storm more of an active piece of your gameplay mechanics. Imagine being able to add in different negative effects that stack on every couple seconds a player stays in the storm. You compare this with things like combat caches you place in the storm that could actually encourage players to risk the downside for potentially better loot. Hell, maybe they let us crank things up even further and add in a storm damage meter that, once it's full, turns the player into a zombie. There's a number of different routes you could take, but in the end, I think we can all agree that having to settle for the same boring storm mechanics in creative has gotten stale. But let's talk about something we've only recently gotten our hands on in Fortnite: vehicle mods. While yes, we have had off-road tires and cow catchers as items in the game since Chapter 3, no one was really all that crazy about them. It wasn't until they got stationed around the map with all the other crazy vehicle mods that things got a little out of hand. Mario Kart and Battle Royale don't exactly fit well together, but in creative, we want that level of chaos. Imagine being able to have even crazier vehicle mods only available in creative that are specifically designed for vehicle combat. Adding in things like vehicle-mounted goo guns, proximity mine launchers, frost grenades, or even shockwave launchers would make for great additions. They could even pull some inspiration from Mario Kart Double Dash and allow you to have a co-pilot that controls the weapons, or could potentially even access normal weapons and items through supply drops you could run over. In the end, I think Epic could definitely benefit from learning that not everything that's overpowered in Battle Royale needs to be trashed entirely. Sometimes it just needs a new home. In Chapter 2, Season 6, Fortnite introduced weapon crafting as part of their Primitive Wilds themed season. You could take basic weapons and use various crafting materials found around the map to essentially upgrade those weapons into more powerful versions. For many, it wasn't really a huge hit during the season, but not much was during Season 6 to be honest. Luckily, this mechanic found a spiritual successor in Chapter 3, Season 4 with the introduction of Evochrome weapons. After dealing a certain amount of damage with these weapons, you could evolve them into the next rarity, all the way up to Legendary. But surprise, this also wasn't very popular. But I think this might just be another case of a mechanic needing a new home in creative. Imagine taking the original crafting mechanic and adding it to a survival map where you could assign different crafting materials to different parts of the map, requiring players who wanted a certain build to fight certain enemies for them. What if we took the evolving weapon mechanic, and instead of having to farm for money to upgrade your weapons at vendors, you could simply focus on using them in combat until they're fully leveled up? Crafting and leveling up your gear are two key mechanics in most RPG games, so forcing creators to jerry-rig their own systems when a solid starting point already exists makes it feel like a waste of another game mechanic on Epic's part. We've finally reached the biggest item on our list, ladies and gentlemen. If this was the only thing on this list that ever actually got added to Fortnite Creative, I feel confident in saying it would change the game forever. It's time for Epic to bring Save the World into creative mode. The number of weapons, items, abilities, and features that are exclusively available in Fortnite Save the World is truly wild. While I understand this mode still has a diehard community, it is minuscule in comparison to the number of players in creative maps, making it feel like all their creative ideas aren't really getting a chance to shine. Creators have been begging for a way to create custom weapons and abilities that already exist in Save the World, but many don't even know that. Weapons like the Obliterator, Blackout, Spectral Blade, Xenon Blade, every Storm King weapon, they're all amazing and we have nothing like them available in creative right now. While playing a Horde Defense campaign mode isn't for me, I can appreciate all the hard work that went into it, and I would love to see it grow in the hands of creators. That's all for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please drop a like and subscribe. We're almost to 5,000 little Daves, and we need you. You specifically. Anyway, bye.